getting diagnosed with, beating the cancer. Were you coming up to that point where you were diagnosed? Did you want to have kids? Were you hoping to have kids, or did the cancer kind of propel you into saying, now I want to have kids? Or what was the shift there?
It was interesting because I remember, being in the doctor's office and they were like, well, do you want to, you're going to go through chemo, and sometimes, men don't always make it through without, becoming sterile. Do you want to save your sperm? And at the time it was not even on my radar to even go, oh, okay, yeah, I should do that because I want to have kids. It was sort of more selfishness mode of going, what do I need to do to beat this and get through that? And then if I can get on the other side of that, then I'll start, thinking about those other things about having kids. But before that, I was really sort of, I think scared to maybe have kids because, like I said before, I thought maybe I'd be a bad father. I don't know why I thought that or why I had that in my head. I'm sure I'll probably hopefully figure that out one day before I die of what that fear was. But no, it's just, after I beat cancer, I was in a previous relationship with my two sons' mother, and it just seemed like the time was sort of right. I mean, especially after coming out of beating cancer, life to me was so precious. And being able to bring another life into this world, the cancer sort of, I guess, changed my idea about that.
What's doing, everybody? I'm Alec Lace. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. Today's guest on the podcast is Barry Watson. Barry Watson is an actor who rose to fame when he starred as Matt Camden in the smash hit family drama series Seventh Heaven. Recently, Barry has starred in Lifetime's reimagination of the hit series Highway to Heaven. He is currently starring in the DC superhero drama Naomi. Barry Watson is a cancer survivor and a first-class father all the way. I'm excited to have him on the podcast today, so get down there, smack the subscribe button, tap the like, and let's jump into it right now with Barry Watson on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, first-class father Barry Watson. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, well, let's kick it off like this here. How many kids do you have? How old?
I have 3 kids, starting off with Oliver, my oldest, who's 16, Felix, who's 14, and my baby girl, Clover, who is 9, going on 40.
Yeah, I could hear that. Yeah, I got 4 kids myself. I have 3 boys. Then we got the girl ourselves on the 4th try. So my oldest is 15, youngest is 7. So I'm right there in the mix with you. What kind of sports or activities are they all into?
So my oldest is playing varsity basketball at his school. So he's really big into basketball. He's also going to be doing volleyball. Felix does basketball. He wants to start maybe getting into football. We're going to see about that this next year. And he's also into tennis. And my daughter Clover is into everything, including reading my wife's text messages. But no, she plays a lot of tennis. She's got for Christmas, she got a set of golf clubs. So she's starting to swing the ball a little bit. So I don't know. She looks like this. She's like this country club girl, I guess.
Now, do you coach the kids in the sports, or you step away from that and enjoy it now that they're a little older and you enjoy it more from the stands?
You know what? When they were, I've coached every one of my kids and or refed or both games of theirs when they were younger. As they've gotten older, though, I have found that it's better to have somebody else sort of take over and coach them. And if they still need my guidance in any way or want to pick my brain about anything, I'm happy to do that. But I think at a certain point, it's nice to sort of let it go and let somebody else take over a little bit, and then let me sit back and sit and watch and enjoy them do their thing.
Yeah, I like that philosophy too. I think also it helps that you know what, you're not always going to have great bosses. You're not always going to have great people. You're going to have to get one of those coaches that you don't agree with or you don't like his style. So it's good to get a little blend of that.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, that's such a great example. I mean, my oldest son, this year has a new coach for basketball. And at first he was like, wow, this coach really yells at me a lot. And I was like, oh, he likes you. And he's like, what? I was like, oh, I'm telling you right now, if your coach is yelling at you, that means he likes you. I know that sounds, he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, every coach I ever had that was yelling at me, looking back, I realized, oh, they just cared about me and were just maybe pushing me a little bit more. I mean, they were never abusive in any way, but yeah, they raised their tone, and it's a different style, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So the other week he was like, yeah, you're right, coach does like me. I'm like, yeah, I told you.
Good stuff. Now, if you could, Barry, please just take a minute here to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Barry Watson. Before I was an actor, I thought I was going to be a professional soccer player. But no, I've been living in LA since 1992. Been working as a working actor since late like 1996. I was on a show called Seventh Heaven for years. Been on multiple other TV shows, and now I am playing the father of Naomi on a new CW show called Naomi, about a young superhero. Yeah. So I'm an actor, but my first job is being a dad. That's my
Well,
number one.
well, take me back to the beginning of that journey then. I know you said your oldest is 16. So about how old were you then, Barry, when you became a dad, and how did that experience change your perspective on life?
Oh wow. Well, so I became a dad at I was 31 or almost, I guess 32, because Oliver was born about a week and a half after my birthday. So it was interesting. I had cancer before I had my first child at 28 years old, and wasn't sure I was able to have kids, and was lucky enough to get through my chemo treatment and all that stuff, and obviously found out everything worked just fine. And my first son was born in 2005. And I think for me, I think at times before I even had kids, I was a little afraid to see what I was going to be like as a father, because sometimes it works out where there's these great dads, and sometimes it doesn't. You never know kind of who you're going to be. But I think for me, it taught me patience, that I wasn't aware that I had, of really putting so much of your own energy into, raising these young beings to hopefully become great human beings one day. So patience was the one thing. And also, I think having kids has really kind of taught me how, I don't know, I think I'm more of a man than I ever could be if I didn't have kids. So I mean, I learn every day from those kids, even times where I don't quite realize that I am learning something or growing or whatever it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, very well said, Barry. And you mentioned there too, obviously, getting diagnosed with, beating the cancer. Were you coming up to that point where you were diagnosed? Did you want to have kids? Were you hoping to have kids, or did the cancer kind of propel you into saying, now I want to have kids? Or what was the shift there?
It was interesting because I remember, being in the doctor's office, and they were like, well, do you want to, you're going to go through chemo, and sometimes, men don't always make it through without, becoming sterile. Do you want to save your sperm? And at the time, it was not even on my radar to even go, oh, okay, yeah, I should do that because I want to have kids. It was sort of more selfishness mode of going, what do I need to do to beat this? And get through that. And then if I can get on the other side of that, then I'll start, thinking about those other things about having kids. But before that, I was really sort of, I think scared to maybe have kids because, like I said before, I thought maybe I'd be a bad father. I don't know why I thought that or why I had that in my head. I'm sure I'll probably hopefully figure that out one day before I die of what that fear was. But no, it's just, after I beat cancer, I was in a previous relationship with my two sons' mother, and it just seemed like the time was sort of right. I mean, especially after coming out of beating cancer, life to me was so precious, and being able to bring another life into this world, that's the cancer sort of, I guess, changed my idea about that.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. And you mentioned there too, you have your two sons from a previous relationship. A lot of like the single guys that I'll interview here on the show, one of the challenging things for them is to figure out what is a good point in a new relationship to introduce their kids to a potential spouse. So like during your relationship with your now wife, at what did you have like a point you needed to get to before you'd feel comfortable enough to introduce your kids to your now wife?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of thought into that whole process. And also at the time, for my now wife, when we first started dating, my priority was really the boys, and she had to learn patience with that because my availability wasn't always what she was hoping it to be. But I think, with her help and her coming from a very large blended family, and her father as well, were very, very sort of helpful in kind of helping me get to that point where I'm like, oh, okay, the time is right for me to introduce, my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, to my boys. And they were very young at the time. I mean, I think Felix was 2.5 and Oliver was 5.5. They were really young. And it was funny because I think the very first time I did introduce them, because my wife's, she's, shorter than I am, and my sons are pretty tall. And so my 5.5-year-old, he was kind of up there, kind of towards her. And he looked at her and he said, "So when are you going to go home to your mom and dad?" And she's like, "What?" And he just thought that he had this thing in his head that she was just some play date that they were having. She was engaging with them and playing with them and stuff like that. And he was like, "Okay, so when are you going home now?"
Well, I'll tell you what, too, transitioning on that, Barry, I talk on this show a lot about the fatherless crisis we have going on. We got so many kids growing up without a father or a father figure in their life. And one of the many reasons for that is a bad relationship and a bad co-parenting situation where people can't getting along. You seem to have this going down pretty well. So what advice could you give to the dad that's out there right now that maybe is just on the onset? How is your co-parenting situation, or what advice could you give to a dad that's just on the onset of a co-parenting situation?
Well, gosh, I mean, look, I think, throughout the years, especially with my situation with the co-parenting, look, I would be lying if I was saying there wasn't ups and downs with that, because we all have our own parenting styles, and, especially when you're having to co-parent, there's going to be times where, you disagree with maybe what the other parent might be doing or how they're parenting at the time. But you know what? You can only control what you can control at home and in your home. And so you kind of have to let that go sometimes and let that other parent the way they want to do it, and just control how you want to parent there, and just never badmouth, never say anything, well, I wouldn't do it that way. Just say, oh, just sort of go with it. I feel like when there's any sort of interference with, the two parents, that's only going to bring some sort of toxicity to the kid, and we always have to remember as kids, we just love our parents no matter how they are, but it's difficult. It's difficult sometimes, but I think as my kids have gotten older and with their mother, I think we've learned that, and we've learned to respect each other's points of views and just let that be what it is. And it's not forcing our own story onto our kids, guiding them to hopefully be able to create their own story in life, without too much of our own influence and our own backstory.
Yeah, very, very well said, Barry. And one of those parenting styles that's different is discipline. So what type of disciplinarian are you as a dad? And is that different than the discipline style you grew up with?
It's definitely different than the style I grew up with. I mean, I discipline my kids where I'm basically like, look, we can have a lot of fun or we cannot have a lot of fun. Which one do you guys want to do? Because this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing it this way. But if we don't, I don't set tons and tons of rules or anything like that. I just try to lead by example. It's interesting. My daughter, we were hanging out the other day and they were giving out appreciations to each other. And I said, oh, okay, well, what do you guys appreciate about me? And my 14-year-old son, Felix, said, you know what, Dad, you're always good to people. Always good to people. And he's never said anything like that. And I said, okay, well, that's obviously I've done something right by example, by just hopefully, and I never talked to him about it, but obviously he's witnessing me interact with strangers or whoever it is. And I try to be a good person. So I really thought that was like, okay, I'm doing something right there.
Yeah. Very cool. And switching it into what you do now, you have mentioned you're playing in Naomi, you're playing the adoptive military father of Naomi in the film or in the show.
Mhm.
One of the things that amazes me about actors is ones that can take on the role of a dad that are not dads yet and play that role. I know I had Matthew McConaughey on the podcast here, and he played a role of a father in a movie before he became a dad. And I know that you don't really get it until you become a father. So guys that can make it believable, it's challenging. But once you are a dad,
Yeah.
you kind of are in your own groove here. So how is it? Is it challenging for you to play a dad, or does so much of your own fatherhood philosophy come into the part? Or are you able to separate that?
No, I think you have to separate some of that, but for the most part, it's all there. It's all the same thing, really. I mean, unless you're playing a terrible father in something, which I haven't played that. I mean, I've played fathers and stuff that where obviously make mistakes, but we all make mistakes. That's just normal, and it's good for kids to see that. But I don't think I'd be able to kind of it makes it easier for me being a father in real life and then being able to go and play a father on television. That's for sure. I don't have to put as much hard work into it. Like, on the TV series Naomi, I call Naomi Pumpkin all the time. I never call her Naomi, I call her Pumpkin. But in real life, that's what I call my daughter is Pumpkin. And it's actually written in there. It wasn't something I brought into it, but my daughter thinks, oh, wow, it's so great, Dad, that you got to throw in that you call her Pumpkin just like me. But being able to say that to my daughter other times makes it easier for me to actually say that line to, Casey, the actress who's playing my daughter. I put those, sometimes when I'm in those scenes with Casey, I'm in those scenes with my daughter. I kind of visualize her in that same situation or one of my sons.
Yeah. What about as far as did becoming a dad kind of influence the particular roles you'll decide to play or go for?
Yeah, I think at times, I mean, not always. I mean, I've done some stuff in the last few years that are a little darker, and those are by my choice, and my kids don't see those things. But of course, there's things that pop up, and I'm like, oh, wow. I mean, Naomi, for one, was such a bonus because I wanted to do it because I wanted to work with Ava DuVernay. But I also saw it as like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to love this show. I'm going to be cool again, at least to my teenage boys. Yeah, I think it definitely influences kind of the way I pick and choose certain things. Yeah.
And I know. I read in the article. I think it was the People magazine article that your boys have watched the Seventh Heaven series. What was their kind of feedback? Did they break their shoes about the show? Do they like the show? What was their kind of take on watching it?
They won't admit that they liked it, but they liked it. They because they binge watched every season. They gave me a hard time about my hair, which I was like, what are you talking about? Back then, my hair was cool, So I keep threatening actually to grow my hair back out like that. And they're like, no. And then my wife's like, no, because it will never look like that ever again.
I think one of the cool things too about that show is that father figure that is in the show, and we don't see that. Like I know you played in the Highway to Heaven there with I know Landon played the Charles Ingalls character on that in the Little House on the Prairie. We had that Mike Brady character from the Brady Bunch. So I think we definitely could use more dads like that from Seventh Heaven for sure, showcasing the family.
Yeah, instead of, showcasing fathers as like, these absentee sort of like parents and stuff like that, I think it's so important to have more and more father roles on television showing kind of like, we are present, we are here, and it's also good for, I like you just said about the Seventh Heaven. I mean, I've heard so many people, whether it be the mom character or the dad character, or, kids growing up watching that show that maybe didn't have a strong father figure. And that sort of filled a small void for them, but it filled something. It gave them some sort of hope or an idea of what a good parental figure should be. Yeah. Right. So I wish there was more of that.
Yeah, and it could influence their own way they are a father when they get a chance. They could base it off of something like that. But yeah, definitely, I think there was a shift when we went to that kind of like Al Bundy type father, who was kind of like a load and the butt of the joke kind of guy.
Yeah, has your hands in your pants all the time, just swigging beers on the couch. That's all they do. Yeah.
And what about any other projects that you got that you're working on right now? What else is coming up for you?
So right now, we actually just finished up shooting the whole season of Naomi. And right now, it was probably one of the hardest shoots I've had because of COVID and all that. And we shot in Atlanta, so I had to travel back and forth quite a bit just to make sure I was, my wife and I try not to go more than 2 weeks without being apart. So it's been the longest I've been away from my wife and the kids, even though I came back to visit. So right now I'm focused on being a short order cook and watching some basketball games and just being a dad for right now. But there's some stuff that I'm starting to read. And we're also going to find out hopefully in the next month or two about if Naomi's coming back for a season 2. So right now it's just, I'm in dad mode.
Yeah, I like that. So last thing I want to hit you in here, Barry, I love to ask all the dads that get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
Oh, wow. So don't listen to everybody who is going to give you advice about when that child's first born, except the person that you've seen be a great father. If you've witnessed that or you have your own father that's like that. But man, just enjoy it. No wasted days. Don't waste the days, and also when they're baby blobs like that, it's kind of like the easiest time, I always felt like, because they just poop and eat and sleep, and when they sleep, try to sleep the same time so you don't get too tired. And as much as you want them to just walk and start running around, that can sometimes be a nightmare. Not to say don't teach your kids how to walk at some point, but it's okay that they don't right away. But no wasted days. Try to really enjoy all those moments because, man, it goes by. And they always say it goes by so fast, but man, it goes by so fast.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Very well said. I love the message. It's been a lot of fun for me. I got to say, Barry Watson, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I look forward. Maybe we can do it again sometime.